MeMonster.
Chapter 166. So our group decided to head northwest for now. Normally, it would take us a few weeks at the very least before we arrive at Xinjiang, where the Qinma sect was located. But because everyone in our group could move fast, Nunim with her excellent footwork, and Taylor who exploded light energy from her feet to move freely on air as well as ground, we could arrive faster. But in my opinion, we shouldn't do it because we weren't in a hurry. Thankfully, Nunim and Taylor fully respected my opinion and followed me without asking the reason. I am not completely certain either, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to invest a little time like this in order to get to a good ending. I wonder what the situation on Earth is like. As she was walking down the path, Taylor asked as she plucked a leaf from a nearby bush and bit it with her mouth. Well, perhaps it was easier to draw emotions on Earth than in Murim. That was why the demon could easily gain power as it pleased. But I was sure that right now, Yekaterina should be still looking for the host of the demon, so no matter how strong the demon currently was, it was impossible for it to roam as free as before. Is it that easy to find a bastard called the host? It's not, but it should be possible, I replied. It would certainly be difficult if it were me or Taylor who went to search for the host. After all, how did you know who was the host amongst 7 billion people? However, if it was Yekaterina who was fluent in various fields, it would be more than doable. It seems like you trust that kid so much, huh? Of course, after all, we are connected by soul. Perhaps the words I uttered were very uncomfortable for them because Taylor and Seol Yungyeon Nunim expressed their discomfort by coughing loudly. Just what should I say when I am with these women? I feel like I have to be careful about every word I choose. By the way, why are you biting the grass in your mouth? I just want to create a martial art atmosphere. Isn't that a Japanese genre? Really, I didn't know. Actually, I'm not sure either. It could be the Taiwanese genre. I don't think that's a thing. As we bickered back and forth in a playful manner, we continued our journey. Come to think of it, lately when I am with them, I think I have always only talked about important things such as talking about my concerns and listening to their advice. However, as we joked around like this and even Nunim made light jokes, most of them were dad jokes, somehow this leisurely time was very enjoyable. And after we moved for about 3 days, we finally arrived at the outskirts of Xinjiang. However, the moment we set foot on the highest peak of a huge mountain range called Sinjubong Peak, we were suddenly surrounded by warriors in all directions. As Taylor and I looked at Nunim, she shook her head. It seems like they are not from Qinma sect. They appeared as if they didn't have any hostility towards us. The 5 figures on the front, who were a mixture of European, African, and Asian people, each had different auras. In addition, close to 50 people were hiding in all directions, but they seemed to have no intention of revealing themselves. Are you from Murim League? As I spoke softly, the European man nodded his head. It is so, Seol Yungyeon, former lord of the Qinma sect. My name is Alex Peng from Kunlun sect. Others also introduced themselves, but they only said their title and affiliation without telling their names. From the moment Murim League appeared around us, Nunim had only been looking at Alex. When Nunim was still maintaining her silence, I asked Alex, "What purpose do you have by coming to us?" It was to confirm whether the Supreme Qinma had really returned or not. I was stunned by his words. I was aware to some extent that the Murim Alliance would be coming to visit us. However, I could not have imagined that someone from the Kunlun sect would also come. No matter how shaky the genre was, this place was still Murim, a place where the strong gain respect and rule above all. It was unthinkable for someone who hadn't reached the same realm as Supreme Qinma to be able to frivolously talk to her, even more when they hail from the opposing faction of the Qinma sect. Confirmation, Suddenly, Seol Yungyeon Nunim's smile became cold. Her voice sank several octaves lowered and swept everyone present into state of fear. Everyone's expression hardened as the color of their face became whiter. I was also included in those group, for it was a killing intent I had never seen before. Wait, we didn't come to fight, The concentration of gravity suddenly increased. The clouds dispersed, the fluttering leaves disappeared into dust, and the ground gradually sank. You not only dare to raise your head in front of me, Supreme Qinma, but also doubt my existence. You guys really want to die, The Murim warriors who had been hiding in all directions, such as on the top of a tree or under a pile of dirt, suddenly grabbed their necks as if they were choking and began to fall. However, the 5 warriors on the forefront seemed to be quite competent, as they were still standing, albeit their faces were dyed red. Newnham then glanced at me as if she was asking me for something, and I nodded my head. Right now, there was no need for the Kunlun sect. The Murim Alliance probably wants to have a conversation with the Supreme Chenma, but the Kunlun sect didn't want that, and they sent Alex with the rest of them in order to interfere. Wait, we are only here to talk. Do I have any reason to talk to worms? When Newnham drew out her sword, Alex shouted as if he didn't want to do it anymore. Damn it, I knew it. Didn't I tell you that talking with Chenma is useless now that this has happened? There is nothing we can do. All we have to do is work together to stop her. Unfortunately for him, the other 4 warriors just took a step back and did not draw their weapons. At that, Alex shouted in great panic. Hey guys, what the hell is this? Alex's complexion grew paler as Newnham took 1 step closer towards him. Damn it, as it turned out, you guys were on the same side. Disappointing. In the end, Alex Peng, who gave up on persuading the Murim League, grinds his teeth and clenches his fists. His inner energy swirled. It may seem insignificant compared to Newnham's strength, but nevertheless it still had a considerable amount of destructive power. Dragon Fist. Ultimate special move. Anger Punch. His skill was very unique, even though it was still in the scope of martial arts, but movement of emotion was contained within it. It was a power which raised one's own anger and made the other person afraid. It was the first time I saw it since Sikma Bang Howen. The anger, mixed with the demon's magic, unfolded in Alex-style fist. Quack-quack-quack-quack. The wind blowing from his fist knocked down rows of trees, smashed rocks, smashed the ground, and reached towards Newnham. Immediately after, emotional fluctuations would begin. The movement of pure emotions that no other Murim warriors could stop would help Alex Peng to face an enemy stronger than him without much difficulty. However, only the surface is shiny. The martial arts are mixed with dirty and obscene magic. Newnham swung her sword in slow motion. Then, the wind pressure that blew violently around her was cut apart and disappeared. In an instant, silence fell to the battleground, and Alex made a stupid sound before trying to take a step back. But it was already too late. With 1 simple step, Xiao Yungyun Newnham approached Alex and buried her sword on his left chest. Alex opened his eyes and looked at his chest. He was stabbed in the heart, but there was no pain nor bleeding. It was a magical swordsmanship that digs precisely between the blood vessels. He would have realized later that Xiao Yungyun Newnham did not pierce his heart with her sword, but she punctured the blood in his heart. It was an elaborate stab that even I couldn't have imagined. Hyok then, as if an immense pain had come upon him, Alex's eyes rolled backwards and he collapsed. Newnham, on the other hand, lightly pulled out her sword and looked at the tip of her sword. There really wasn't a single drop of blood on it, as if she deliberately did it that way because she did not want the blood of a garbage like him smearing her precious sword. All warriors of Murim present trembled. Alex, who was a fist fighter, used a staggeringly sharp movement, but the Supreme Chenma had effortlessly cut it with a light attack and instantly killed an expert who had reached the peak with a simple stab. That fact alone had made all of them understand the extent of her strength and the fact that she was truly a supreme being. When Newnham looked around her audience while still holding her sword, the Murim people who were touched by her gaze gulped their saliva. But in fact, they didn't have to be afraid because her role had ended here. From now on, it was my turn. Now then, all of the Murim League, you said you wanted to talk to us. Someone stiffly nodded at my inquiry. I was satisfied with him and smiled. Actually, we also had something we wanted to tell you. May I ask what it is? This time the correct answer came back. I said to him with a soft smile. Did you know that the Kunlun sect mixed martial arts with magic? Magic, it was a very sensitive word in the martial arts genre, and it was a technique that should never be used by a swordsman. It was proven by the fact that Murim people, who were defeated by the unusual technique used by the main character of the martial arts novels, often say, "Damn, you are using magic." And do you also know that the magic they have was started from a certain divine object? In other words, the story I am going to tell them from now on would be a very secret, yet coveted story by everyone in the Murim Alliance. After the conversation with the Murim Alliance ended, Taylor asked as we came out of the peak. Hey, have you been deliberately going slowly just to meet them? That's right. Why? Let me ask you this, why did the Murim Alliance come to us? Do you know that the Kunlun sect holds too much power in the Murim Alliance right now? And the truth is, Chinma sect is also a thorn in the eyes of the Murim Alliance. Okay. Kunlun, the strongest sect of the Murim Alliance, or Chinma sect, the single most powerful force. Both were a problem for the Murim Alliance, so they were trying to cut their power by somehow letting them fight. Makes sense. Although the Murim Alliance looked united at first glance, it was not. The internal strife between sects never ends. In order to raise their ranks, to get a little more breath, to spread their shoulders a little more, they were ready to stab each other within the same Murim Alliance. I used the fact that the Kunlun sect could use anger to instigate fear as an example to provide evidence that they were using magic. Murim Alliance might not trust my words right now, but the existence of Magic Orb was already proven since Shadow Group was aware of it. Sooner or later, the Murim Alliance would question the Kunlun sect about their magical power, and if Kunlun refuses to answer, that would only serve as a proof to my words. Except for the Kunlun sect, the sects in Murim Alliance somehow got along well and harbored the same thought of sending both Kunlun and Chinma sect away. However, I wasn't certain about that, so I took a different approach of accelerating the division within the Murim Alliance, starting with the fall of Kunlun sect from the Murim Alliance. Until now, the Murim Alliance had no means or method to directly attack the Kunlun sect, but if the relationship between them and magic was revealed, the Murim Alliance would be able to damage the Kunlun sect as much as they want through political means. They will slowly scratch the Kunlun sect from the inside, and they would probably move with the pretext of recovering the evil divine object as soon as possible. But do they really only want to recover the magic orb? No way. It had been proven that using the magic orb would strengthen martial arts, so there's no way they would sit still. Probably most of the sects would try to take it and use it secretly for themselves, and once they neutralized the threat known as Kunlun sect, they would eventually gnaw at each other. In the meantime, we just have to wait. Somehow it sounds like a good plan, but you were so wicked. Taylor's praise made me very happy. Chapter 167. The current Chinma sect had as many as 2,000 to 3,000 members. Compared to its glory in the past, it was a trivial number. However, the current state of Chinma sect could also be said as a testament of the ability of the new lord, since she was able to achieve it even though it hasn't been that long since Chinma sect was completely destroyed. We heard Supreme Chinma has returned. At the words of Han Soran, Beek Sohwi, the current lord of Chinma sect, nodded with excitement. She was not the only one, as all the women who were above the elder level who had gathered on the steepest and sharpest Chinma cliff in MT, Hundi had the same expression. Xiao Yungyun, the former lord of the Chinma sect, was an idol for all female warriors in Murim. She had made a name for herself in history. Although many women had also marked their name in history, the number was very small and it was difficult to find high-quality women warriors in the present generation. Didn't you say she was coming here now? Beek Sohwi, a woman with dark hair and black eyes who had a ferocious expression, said so, and all the elders' eyes trembled. When they entered the Chinma sect, they thought that the existence of Xiao Yungyun had already disappeared into history and could never be met. However, the legend had come to see them in person. That fact alone seemed to melt their body away from happiness. Beek Sohwi also struggled to calm her excited heart. Although she had been expelled from the Chinma sect by Xiao Yungyun, she never knew that she was also protecting Beek Sohwi by doing it. Not only that, she had saved her, taught martial arts to her who was a beggar to protect herself, and gave her wings so that she could pursue her dream like this. She would not be able to repay all of her favors in the lifetime. Finally, we will meet again. Beek Sohwi closed her eyes. She remembered just how devastated she was when she heard Chinma sect had been destroyed immediately after she left it. Although she had no close friends since most of the members were men, she couldn't help but despair even more when she heard that Xiao Yungyun, the woman she admired and loved the most, had also disappeared without a trace. From the moment she first learned martial arts, Beek Sohwi's goal was to be with her master, Xiao Yungyun, whom she admired. She wanted to stand next to her after establishing herself as a proud Murim warrior. However, that dream was shattered before it could come true, and her goal had become revenge. But unfortunately for her, even the target for her revenge had completely disappeared from this Murim. they had returned to their hometown, Earth. Bikso Hwi, who lost her goal, did not let go of herself. She would rather re-establish the Chinma sect and carry the will of Seol Yungyeon. She was ready to once again fight against the Kunlun sect and the whole Murim alliance who had constantly tormented her sect, and plant the banner of Chinma sect in the world once again. So Bikso Hwi continued to devote himself to the development of the Chinma sect. In a way, it was only natural that the Chinma sect became a place only for women under her rule, since Bikso Hwi had the experience of being terrified by men when she was young and had constantly hated men in general. No, to be honest, she was still afraid of men. They were so frightening and disgusting that she did not accept them. Still, it's fine, Master will understand. When she opened her eyes again, an aura that only one person in this world could radiate vividly enveloped Bikso Hwi. She felt a dizzying thrill and slowly lowered her gaze. At the place she rested her gaze at, a woman with hair resembling a snowy mountain under the sunset was looking at her with her eyes which looked like the most beautiful lotus flowers in the world. Bikso Hwi never forgot about it. She had lived her insignificant life solely to carry her will. The thought of days she dreamt about finally awoke her from her reminiscences. Her master walked towards the dangerous cliff edge. She was still as beautiful as she remembered, so Bikso Hwi forgets to control her own expression and almost sheds tears. Master. To her call, Seol Yungyeon responded with a soft smile. You have grown a lot, she said, more than the last time we met. It's all thanks to you, Master. Unlike Seol Yungyeon, who was barely 160 cm, Bikso Hwi's height was over 170 cm. That was why she had to look down on her now. However, she was still a being that she had to look up at. Engraving that fact on her chest, Bikso Hwi slowly approached Seol Yungyeon before wrapping her arms around her body. Bikso Hwi hummed as she closed her eyes. The warmth, the cozy warmth, how wonderful it would be if this moment could last forever. Hi. She belatedly found two people who were coming with Seol Yungyeon. On one side was a beautiful woman with short silver hair braided in a round braid, and on the other side was a man. A man. Surprised by the fact that such existence had entered the realm of the Chinma sect, Bikso Hwi retreated from Seol Yungyeon's arms and unsheathed the swords on her hips. Who are you to dare to step your filthy foot on the realm of our sect? Then, as if expecting the reaction, the man sighed deeply and simply stepped back. Rather, it was Seol Yungyeon who was embarrassed by Bikso Hwi's coldness. Calm down, So Hwi, that man is the man I love with my life. He can be trusted, so there is no need for you to be hostile towards him. Seol Yungyeon said so to relieve Bikso Hwi's vigilance. Even though Bikso Hwi was afraid of men, she knew she would open up her heart to a certain extent if she knew that the man was someone she loved. But that was her mistake. Did you say he is the man you loved? At So Hwi's question, Seol Yungyeon glanced at Taylor, who was listening behind her, and smiled softly. Yes, I love him with all my heart and body. Bikso Hwi clenched her mouth as Seol Yungyeon gently caressed her head. Just like you, I was once tormented by a man. Every day was hell, and I lived thinking that I would rather die. However, you can overcome it. If you too meet a man you love, if you meet someone whom you can give your heart to, you will surely be able to heal the wounds that have engulfed your heart. I understand. Seol Yungyeon hugged the current lord once again, and Bikso Hwi, even on her hug, kept staring dagger at Yu Seodam. She couldn't hear a single word from Seol Yungyeon already. After arriving at the realm of Chinma sect, Seol Yungyeon's first destination wasn't the reconstructed palace of Chinma, but was the tomb. It was said that Bikso Hwi was the one in charge of building the tombstone of the believers, which Seol Yungyeon originally intended to do. Seol Yungyeon's face darkened as she looked at the tombstones that were spacious enough to reach the end of the horizon in the distance. She struggled to shake off her sadness. She had decided since she was still on Earth that she wouldn't come here to mourn but to let go of the souls she had cherished in her heart. I'm back, and yet you guys can't even say a word. Mumbling with a bitter tone, Seol Yungyeon carved every single tombstone into her eyes one by one. Unfortunately, Bikso Hwi, who could not tell who was who when the bodies were retrieved, did not have their names engraved on their tombstones. So to tell them apart, Beak So Hys simply put the weapons and uniforms lying on the body next to the gravestone. When she emotionally told that to Seol Yungyeon simply patted her. "It's okay, I remember all of them." Having said that, she took out a small dagger and approached the tombstone right in front of her. There was only one rusty and broken sword hilt on the side of it, but Seol Yungyeon knew at a glance who it belonged to. Jang Seoyoung, the Emperor of Heaven. As soon as names were engraved on the tombstone, the elders who were watching from behind opened their eyes wide. Even if at glance it looks like Seol Yungyeon had simply written letters, but in the eyes of an expert, the dagger technique she did contained the secrets of swordsmanship that had reached the realm of Hunkyung. Reminder, Hunkyung equals SSS rank. After that, Seol Yungyeon continued to engrave names on every single tombstone while remembering their faces and bid them farewell. "May you be happy there. I hope you will enjoy the happiness that you could not have enjoyed here." Beak So Hwy watched Seol Yungyeon from behind as numerous questions popped out in her head. Just how much did she love the Chinma sect? How deeply she cherished them in her heart? How could she do that? Will she be able to become a great lord just like her master? Feeling a sense of skepticism creeping in, Beak So Hwy shook his head. No matter how much she thought about it, she wouldn't find any answer. After all, Seol Yungyeon was more perfect in every aspect than her. Seol Yungyeon's farewell took 3 days, and during that time, she did not rest at all. Beak So Hwy and all the elders also watched Seol Yungyeon from behind until the end. But now it's time to rise. After saying her goodbye to the last tombstone, Seol Yungyeon looked back. Her eyes looked tired, but her face brightened as if all the heavy burdens on her chest had been lifted. "Master, are you happy now?" "That is so. I am happy to be able to finally say goodbye." "If so." Beak So Hwy swallowed her saliva before opening her mouth with determined eyes. "Please become the lord of the Chinma sect and lead us once again in our Chinma sect. Master is absolutely necessary." The wind blew past, making Seol Yungyeon's hair dance to the tune of it. She smiled bitterly and made eye contact with Beak So Hwy for a while before shaking her head. "I am sorry, I have to go back home again." Why Beak So Hwy couldn't understand. She had taken care of all of the members of the Chinma sect one by one, and why did Seol Yungyeon, who was so happy, rejected her offer to become the lord once again? Is she afraid of losing them again? Is she afraid of repeating her mistakes again? No, that is not the reason. Then. The moment Beak So Hwy was about to ask why, she suddenly remembered a certain man she had met 3 days ago. He was an ordinary man with insignificant skills, but nevertheless Seol Yungyeon said that she loved him with all her body and mind. And he was an earthling. If the purpose of coming here is resolved, he would surely return to Earth. Master, she would never be able to part with that man. In order not to be heard by Seol Yungyeon, Beak So Hwy clenched her teeth. Her eyes were bloodshot as she thought of that man. "Only. Curse you, man who defiled my master." The man who had dyed the white fresh snow, the snow that no one has stepped on. Recalling him, Beak So Hwy's eyes were filled with anger, hatred, and despair. "I can't bring back my master who has already been soaked in impurities." If so, at least she could make sure that she wouldn't be stained anymore and make sure to thoroughly put an end to her lust for him so she would settle down in the Chinma sect again. The only choice is to kill that man. Chapter 168. Kunlun Mountain, Qinghai Province. The huge mountain, which looked like it was made of jade, also called Jade Mountain. It was so high that even the clouds couldn't reach it. That was why it was impossible for ordinary people to even look up to it. And at the top of the mountain resides a sect who represented the strong Taoist martial arts. Du Chialho, an old member of Kunlun sect, and the elders of Kunlun sect gathered urgently. Their faces were colored in many different expressions. "The Rotten Murim Alliance keep asking about the magic orb. They demand us to tell them about magic." Du Chialho gritted his teeth. How did it happen until just a few days ago? The Murim Alliance would not have known about magic at all. No, even if they knew it in the first place, how did they know about magic orb also? How did they know that magic was mixed with Kunlun sect's martial arts? "Please refuse to answer." Even while I continued to delay answering, the Murim Alliance had already mobilized their troops. It would be a big deal if the Murim Alliance turned their back on us. Then you suggest we give them the magic orb. That's suicide rather. It is better to keep it with us and strengthen the troops. Even if an all-out war broke out, we would be able to stop it if we were in trouble. At his words, some elders lowered their heads. Why was Kunlun so corrupted? Once upon a time, the sect was built under the belief that someone would not die once they climbed to the peak of the Yangpyeong. Instead, they would become a spirit once they climbed to Hyunpo and would become a god when one reaches the sanction. However, that very belief had made the Kunlun sect too conservative, and the elders had refused to bring in foreign culture to their midst. It would have been a little better if they had accepted the Earthlings, or at least accepted the people from different races. It was said that the other sects embraced the change and accepted everyone regardless of whether they were black or white, resulting in their remarkable growth. However, the Kunlun faction rejected it, and their power was noticeably weakened. If it was like this and yet they still accepted the demon's magic to strengthen their power, what's the point of sticking with the tradition of Kunlun? In fact, the question itself made no sense because it was Du Chialho, the oldest member of the sect, who would have known that fact best. I can't, once again, I have no choice but to borrow the power of the magic orb. However, the more someone uses the power of the magic orb, the more it will invade their spirits and mind. Despite knowing that in the end, he had no choice but to rely on this stronger force to preserve Kunlun. When Du Chialho beckoned, a person who was waiting behind him came out and put the magic orb on the table. Every time he saw the dark and red magic sphere, he felt something ominous from it. But this was also the blessed creature that had helped the Kunlun sect become the strongest sect. Let me start. In fact, Yu Autumn had anticipated this situation. He just didn't think it would be this bad. Bikso Hwi hated men and created a sect made up of only women. It meant that it was impossible for Yu Autumn, who was a man, to visit them. So he suggested, should I just go away, but Seol Jungyun denied it by saying it would be okay. She went a mile further by saying it would be a great opportunity for Bikso Hwi since she would see Seol Jungyun become happy once again because of a man after her life was thrown into hell by a man. Yu Autumn could understand her reasoning to some extent, but it was only valid if Bikso Hwi still respects Seol Jungyun and if her words still move her heart. But Bikso Hwi was a coward. The trauma from her childhood got worse with each passing day, and eventually it became a corrosive tumor to the point she convinced herself, even master is wrong, I have to fix it. However, Seol Jungyun did not give up. In her memory, Bikso Hwi was a small, cowardly child. She was so afraid of men that she even killed a small boy. Unnecessary killing was unacceptable, and at that time, Seol Jungyun gave a severe punishment to Bikso Hwi by excommunicating her. But her intention of having her face her inner demon and overcome it did not bear fruit. It seems like it was a futile idea in the end. Yu Autumn was lying on the bed while thinking about it. Looking out from the gap of the door, he could see Taylor sparring with members from the sect. She swung her baseball bat around and spewed lasers in all directions while her opponent tried to avoid it. It's been a week since he spent time here for Seol Jungyun's farewell. Now that the farewell is over, Seol Jungyun had to look around the territory as a former lord of the sect. She was wise, and although she had been absent from the position for a long time, she was more experienced than Bikso Hwi, and she had made several improvements to the sect. In the meantime, Yu Autumn was being treated in a cold manner by everyone on the sect. Taylor 9 possesses a level of strength comparable to that of a Hwakyung expert, so it was only natural that she was treated kindly by the experts within the clan. However, compared to Taylor, Yu Autumn, on top of being a man, his power was only comparable to high peak rank expert. No one spoke to him, and they gave him the cold shoulder even though they were the one who initiated contact with him. It was only his speculation, but perhaps it was all ordered by Bikso Hwi. No, looking into the eyes of the members of the sect, he could see that all of them had been thoroughly brainwashed with Bikso Hwi's perception of men. Anyway, it seems like a major accident will soon happen to me. The fact that the subject was himself makes his heart quite complicated, but it didn't matter. After all, the main purpose of coming here had been achieved. According to the Shadow Group, the Murim Alliance had begun to move. All that is left was the timing of Chinmasek's appearance when the Murim Alliance was engulfed in chaos. That's enough. Thinking so, UC Autumn was about to try to enjoy the leisure as much as possible, but it was then something flew through the window. When he stretched out his hand, a flower pot enchanted in a magic sphere specializing in acceleration and stealth was caught. Unpacking the small letter tied to it, UC Autumn begins to read it. Emily. The situation so far has been quite similar to his prediction. In the end, despite the warning, the Kunlun sect did not give up the magic orb, and in the end, the Murim Alliance united and had a small clash with the Kunlun sect. It seems that Kunlun's martial arts have gotten a little stronger. UC Autumn thought for a moment. It seems that Kunlun sect had borrowed the power of demon again, fearing that they would lose the war. By the way, as he read the sentence added below it, UC Autumn frowned. A new power believed to be demon's magic has been discovered. It was also discovered in a sect belonging to the Murim Alliance. The magic had very unusual powers, such as giving the opponent a strong feeling of exhaustion and helplessness, making them collapse during battle. It was a power completely different from the fear and anger possessed by the existing demons. That being said, it means that another demon has appeared. Well, the gate to the world of the demons is already open here. Bang Ho-Win's lecherous art, the demons of fear and anger, and another sloth demon. 3 demons had already been discovered. Just how many more demons are hiding in this Murim? But no matter how much I think about it, I wouldn't be able to solve them fundamentally. For the sake of the Earth right now, the only choice is to completely close the portal to Murim. The Gwizzledy, a unit under the direct control of the Lord, was a small unit consist of 5 high peak rank experts and 12 peak rank experts, and specialized in assassination of a single expert. They work using all kinds of illusions to dye the area with darkness, blocking the senses of the opponent, and also twist the sense of direction and space to induce them to avoid their attacks. And this time, their lord, Beak Sohwi, participated in the operation directly. It was an operation to deal with a man called UC Autumn. In order to actually assassinate someone, they must first understand the characteristics and habits of the opponent. The time Seol Youngyeon and her party stayed at Chinma Palace had already been almost 2 weeks, and throughout that time the Gwizzledy had grasped one of the habits of UC Autumn. It was his habit in the evening where he would always go to the peak alone to watch the sunset. For some reason, whenever he went hiking, his body would always be wet with sweat, but just like the woman named Taylor, it could be that it was only his body which was weak while his ability was strong. But it was enough, since it will soon become a fatal weakness towards his death. This evening, as always, UC Autumn climbed the peak to watch the sunset. Beak Sohwi couldn't quite understand his behavior. After all, it was a sight that she saw every day. He looked up at the sky with his back facing her as if he wanted to pretend to be cool. The 17 members of the team and the Beak Sohwi who were secretly pursuing him unleashed their secret technique once they reached the peak. The wind blew and the grass shook violently. At some point, they all encircled UC Autumn. "Is that all of you?" UC Autumn asked without glancing towards them. It was such a cliché line that is always said by powerful experts in a martial arts movie. However, he had to admit that it wasn't very cool when he was the one who said it. "It is already too many just to end a life as insignificant as yours." Beak Sohwi replied. It was a very natural conviction. UC Autumn was only at the level of the high peak expert, but there were 5 high peak experts in the group. Moreover, Beak Sohwi herself had reached a higher stage than that. Even those who had reached the realm of a Chwakyung expert would not be able to withstand the technique the Gwizzledy was spreading. It could be said that Beak Sohwi had brought too many people just to kill UC Autumn. But UC Autumn only laughed. He may seem like he was calm, but behind his demeanor, he was using concentration to catch the string of mana swaying in his surroundings. The members of Gwizzledy opened their eyes wide and looked at each other. "Lord." Beak Sohwi also felt something and frowned. "What is this?" When the 17 members of Gwizzledy arrived at this place, she was certain that the Jinbeop had been activated. Numerous devices and natural objects were installed everywhere, and supernatural phenomena should already have occurred. But they wouldn't know the fact that UC Autumn was already interpreting the existence of their Jinbeop, that even themselves cannot understand the principle behind it. For UC Autumn, it was merely a branch of science called magic. All of nature's occurrence had a rationale, a principle, and a mixture of mathematical formulas. UC Autumn simply cut it off with the help of the Library of the White Witch and the Flower Pot. Only, it seems that you could see through our jinbiup, but it doesn't matter. After all, our strength alone is enough for you. The moment she said that, Beak Sohwi felt something strange. Suddenly, the sunset came to her mind. It was strange since the already setting sun was rising once again, but the clouds, which had been flowing slowly before, began to flow quickly, too quickly if she was honest. The wind stopped, the sun was rising, but the world was getting dark. Then, UC Autumn looked back. He smiled pretentiously as he struggled to cover the damp, cold sweat that had spread all over his body. Since when have you been using the jinbiup? Chapter 169. Jinbiup was the act of engraving a specific object or mark in a specific place, or a specific number of people who were gathering at a specific location, performing a specific motion to cause a certain mysterious natural phenomenon. Of course, jinbiup wasn't perfect. There were a number of countermeasures one could employ to fight its effect, such as changing the arrangement of stones on the floor, walking along a specific path, or closing their eyes or ears. However, the countermeasures were different depending on the jinbiup itself, and the more advanced the jinbiup is, the more difficult it was to deal with. The creation of natural phenomena using the arrangement of objects and people like that was very similar to the beginning of the science called magic. Primitive magic was mostly activated by combining body parts of certain creatures or plants just like jinbiup, while modern magic was activated by formulating the arrangement of mana and using the laws of nature. Of course, jinbiup and magic couldn't be said to be the exact same technique, because in the end, jinbiup was something derived from martial arts while magic was derived from mysticism. However, thinking that the two were similar, UC Autumn had asked Seol Yungyeon about jinbiup as well as various techniques that Chinma sect could use while staying at Chinma Palace and studied how to deal with them. As a result, he had constructed a physical manipulating barrier magic circle on the peak of the mountain by squeezing out all his mana every day for 2 weeks without a break. The function of the barrier itself was self-explanatory. It allows its caster to manipulate the law of reality at will. Even in Library of the White Witch, the magic circle was ranked as C-rank magic, and it was the most difficult barrier magic amongst all. Considering the fact that even a D-rank library couldn't be properly accessed by him, UC Autumn was once again reminded of the prowess of the flower pot. Hey Witch Tilda. You've worked hard. After this job is over, I will give you enough soju until you're sick of it. Okay Tilda he Tilda. Glittering beam of light exploded from above his shoulder, and a spirit slightly larger than the palm of his hand flew up. The current flower pot was able to escape from its petals a little. As she began to circle around Autumn, he also drew out his sword. What the hell did you do? Why is this the first time you've been exposed to a jinbiup? Beak Sohwi's expression hardened. Her ferocious cat face became even scarier than usual. As a HWAC young expert, her level alone was 200, so her level was much higher than UC Autumn. Nevertheless, the moment she entered the barrier, which was also called the Wizard's Space, it became certain that she couldn't kill UC Autumn. However, Beak Sohwi was unaware of the fact and was not afraid of the jinbiup used by a high peak rank expert. She just felt the fight would be slightly troublesome. Slowly, Beak Sohwi took a step forward. As if an escalator had been installed, the distance between her and UC Autumn instantly widened by 10 m. What is this? Beak Sohwi grimaced. It was the first time she saw such a trick in her life. Was it a jinbiup that manipulates the space itself? Of course, the truth is UC Autumn could only cloud her senses by moving the ground little by little, but the magic barrier designed for 2 weeks was powerful enough to even make an expert fall into a state of confusion. Stay calm, spread out, and execute Heavenly Demon Extermination Technique. One of the other basic techniques they practiced was a technique that completely steals opportunity and rhythm from the opponent by attacking at the right timing, with the 17 experts skillfully positioning themselves and attacking at the right time. And at that time, UC Autumn finally began to move. He took off his white uniform underneath which he wore an armor like a medieval European knight and drew a Western-style sword. Eventually, with a beeping sound, a dark red magic circle was created underneath Yu Xiaodam's feet. It shot out a bunch of sharp rocks in all directions. Just what? It was a technique in magic that Beak Hwi and the Gwizzledy, who had seen a lot of things, had never seen before. Even the swordsmanship used by the sect lord was not as aggressive and bizarre as the phenomenon before their eyes. The attack which Gwizzledy had thrown towards Yu Xiaodam hit a different spot from what they intended it to after seemingly hitting Yu Xiaodam's neck. Even when they stabbed their sword towards Yu Xiaodam, they couldn't reach him because the distance between them suddenly widened again. On the other hand, Yu Xiaodam was able to deal some blows towards the group while parrying several of their attacks. But while clashing with them, Yu Xiaodam realized, if I fight them with my swordsmanship alone, it's going to be a disaster. Although the swordsmanship of the Gwizzledy was only at the level of peak rank expert, their pure technique itself was comparable to or superior to Yu Xiaodam's swordsmanship. Their swordsmanship was so sharp to the point if he made a mistake, his neck would instantly fly. So he decided to passively use the sword while actively employing magic. Thanks to Flowerpot, who had become stronger than before, Yu Xiaodam was able to fight like a proper magician. Boom! Lightning struck from the clear sky and split the ground into two, entangling the feet of several Gwizzledy's members. After that, a pure white blizzard blew out of nowhere. I can't even get close. Of course, aside from the barrier, Yu Xiaodam had also installed dozens of pre-installed magic around the peak. In the realm created by magicians, the power they could exert was higher than usual, so Yu Xiaodam could comfortably withstand the assault of 18 Murim experts. But even when the experts didn't know about magic, Yu Xiaodam's chances of winning were questionable at best. Even though he had designed dozens of magic spells and even installed a C-rank barrier, the Gwizzledy were undoubtedly powerful. He couldn't deal a decisive blow at them, and if more than 3 people approached him, Yu Xiaodam had no choice but to retreat. However, from the point of view of the Gwizzledy, they were no longer thinking whether Yu Xiaodam was strong or not. Only a burning fire of rage was left in their mind. They had pride as a group who were able to defeat even a dragon when 17 of them gathered together, but currently their strength of numbers was incapacitated in this space, and because of the mysterious magic that only one person used, they could not even attack properly. Also, the man was quick to run away like a coward even when they were slightly close to him. It made it very difficult for even the strongest 5 experts in their group to catch up with him. Even though you are born as a man, you keep running away, it's unsightly. You guys are the unsightly one because even with 18 of you, you can't even beat me alone. Moreover, even if they threw a taunt to him, he counterattacked as if his tongue were coated in oil, making their anger rise even more. So Beak Hwi, who finally snapped, exploded the Jinshin inner energy in her body. In an instant, the flow of air subsided. The energy of the barrier was partially being offset, and at the same time, all Gwizzledy members were struck by vertigo. Up until now, she had been hiding her energy as a consideration for her allies, but she thought there was no need for that anymore. I'll catch the guy myself. From her body, a ferocious red magic energy, which could be called as the trademark of Chenma, erupted. In Xiao Yungyun's case, the red energy was controlled tightly, and finally, it was sublimated into a beautiful pink color, but Beak Hwi treated the energy in a wilder way, making it even redder. It seemed as if a wind of blood were blowing all over the world, because even the sky was dyed red by it. How dare you enrage the Chenma sect? With every step she took, several installed magic on the surroundings disintegrated. Magic which was thrown towards her by Yu Xiaodam was shattered by a simple gesture, and the magic that he had prepared for a little while was also split in half when she swung her sword. After all, since martial arts also use mana essence in the air, the stronger one would cancel the weaker one. Yu Xiaodam broke out in a cold sweat. At this rate, I think I will be caught. Yu Xiaodam was severely affected by the aura emanated by Beak Hwi even inside the barrier he designed for himself. Because in the end, he was still only a level 150, and the power gap between him and a level 200 or Hwakyung expert was as vast as sea. It was still possible for him to hold the barrier for now, but it wouldn't be so for long. But it doesn't matter, because Yu Xiaodam's purpose was to stand his ground even when Beak Hwi was attacking. What are you doing? Beak Hwi raised her eyebrows and asked Yu Xiaodam, who released his battle stance and lowered his sword. but without answering, he just looked somewhere. Hwi then realized something and gathered her aura. She slowly turned her head towards the edge of the cliff. There, Seol Yungyun was looking at her with a complicated expression on her face. Her pure white sword was also drawn. Master, what happened here? Explain, Hwi. Seol Yungyun's hair started to flutter. However, unlike Hwi, who was covered in red aura, there was no aura surrounding Seol Yungyun. Having reached the realm of Hunkyung, her aura was simply colorless and formless. After several moments passed, Hwi finally opened her mouth. Master is now being contaminated by that man. This is all for you, Master. You may not understand right now, but in the future, you will be grateful to me. Shut your mouth, Seol Yungyun said without hearing her rambling to the end, and finally her unique pale pink aura bloomed all over her. The white lotus, which was all white, slowly turned pink and finally filled the red sky. Yu Seodam briefly admired the splendid atmosphere which had turned the apocalyptic atmosphere in the surrounding into the atmosphere, as if the cherry blossom season had arrived. You have gone too far, Hwi. Master, something is wrong with you, my master, who had reached the realm of Hunkyung that will never be seen again in history, and just for that man. What does greatness have to do with it? You are in the wrong for thinking about something like that right now. If not, are you saying that I shouldn't even be in love after I've reached the realm of Hunkyung? Falling in love is permitted to any woman. How dare you decide what my heart can feel? Master, I don't mean it like that. I only meant that the very existence of a man is wrong, as if frustrated, Hwi exclaimed. Seol Yungyun shook her head as if she was genuinely sorry and pointed her sword at her. Giving one's heart to someone they love is something that humans have been doing since ancient times. There is nothing wrong with me giving my heart to a man. The wrong thing here is your opinion. I know how you feel when you've been tortured by a man. However, from the moment you inflict damage on others with your thoughts and beliefs, it should be called plague, not a mere wound that can be cured. I can't admit it, said Hwi as blood dripped from her eyes, but Seol Yungyun didn't stop and still approached Hwi. Do you love me? Yes, enough to give everything in this world to you. Thank you. How would you feel if I died? I would despair. I will either kill myself or destroy everything in the world. That's exactly how I feel right now. Yes, Hwi looked at her in disbelief with a hopeful expression, but in the end, the answer she wanted did not come. Not you, but that man. If you had killed someone I loved to the point I'd give him the world if he desired it, do you think I would just sit still? Seol Yungyun shook her head. I would have struck you in the neck without even the slightest hesitation. There is no room for excuses. Seol Yungyun approached Hwi and pointed her sword at her neck. For some reason, the blade Hwi had always thought was a beautiful sword was so cold and sharp today, and she felt like she was about to cry. Hwi, I know the wounds you're going through, but I firmly believe that if you treat your wound with affection, it can be healed. Seol Yungyun slowly looked at the Gwizzledy behind Hwi. The current Chinma sect was not like what it used to be. Because of the wounded lord, the Chinma sect also suffered those wounds. It was really sad and heartbreaking for her. If this place wasn't Murim but earth, and if she hadn't done harm to Seol Yungyun, her Yu Seodam would likely have found a way to heal her with his heart. But aside from that, her wounds did not match the Chinma sect at all. What they should seek was pure strength, not wounds. Hwi. Wait a minute, master, it can't be. I don't want it. I'd rather die by your hand than to be abandoned by you again, please. Only. However, Seol Yungyun could not cut off the disciple she had raised with her own hands and was once she loved more than anyone else with her own hands. She was forced to inflict the most severe punishment she could. I will excommunicate you from the Chinma sect as of today. Leave, and live forever unseen by me. At those words, Hwi collapsed to the floor. Chapter 170. I am sorry, I didn't know she hated men that much. Newnham apologized to me after Hwi left. I didn't respond to her. The whole incident had left a bitter taste in my mouth. I could tolerate it though, since the whole ordeal stemmed from Hwi's wound in her heart, not from malice. Hwi's face as she left looked really lonely. It was only natural since she had been excommunicated twice by her beloved and respected master for the exact same reason. The question is, what would she do afterwards? Is she going to sharpen her blade of revenge according to the obvious cliché and going to chase after me or Newnham? Well, to be honest, I was very worried about that. In this world where demons existed, I was certain the demons wouldn't leave a strong person with weakened emotions alone. They would soon approach Beak So-HWI. Logically speaking, it would only be right to kill Beak So-HWI right away and leave no room for future trouble. That's how I've survived until now. However, just before she left, I caught a glimpse of Beak So-HY's eyes and put those thoughts aside. Her eyes told me that she held no grudges toward me or Seol Jungyun Newnham and had completely given up. With all agony in her heart, she quietly accepted her fate and went away. I should be the one to apologize. Because of me, Newnham had to let your precious disciple go. That was my fault, not yours. I was foolish to hastily judge she could be healed even though I knew the depth of that child's wound. In many ways, the end result was not good. The long history of the Chenma sect will end like this today, Newnham said with a sad but decisive tone. The current Chenma sect was built around Beak So-HY's thoughts and beliefs, so there was no reason for them to exist any longer when their central pillar had gone. Then what will happen to us those who were still present on the peak said with trembling voices. Even after Beak So-HWI left, it seemed that they still couldn't accept the reality. In addition, the members of the Chenma sect had gathered one after another to see what's happening since they felt a strong energy clashing against each other. They then grasped the situation and pleaded with a desperate expression on their face. Are you becoming our new pillar? If Newnham becomes the new lord, many followers would remain and follow her overwhelming presence. But she had no intention of staying here, so she couldn't answer their plea and only shook her head. These people were people who were gathered by Beak So-HWI. She had healed their wounds and made them come under her banner. If in any case, Seol Jungyun Newnham, the supreme Chenma, reigns as the lord of the Chenma sect once again, will they really follow her? Some of them would, but that alone would completely make the Chenma sect weaker than ever. Newnham was well aware of that fact, so in a soft but resonating voice she spoke. As of today, the Chenma sect is disbanded. Under the heaven, no one will be able to use the name Chenma ever again, and no one will be able to talk about the doctrine of heavenly demon ever again. At those words, all the members of the sect opened their eyes wide. So all of you also go to the place you want the most. As soon as those words were spoken, the Murim people who were no longer members of the Chenma sect scattered in all directions. Just what kind of feeling she had after declaring this is the end of her beloved sect I wouldn't dare to fathom. It wasn't the proper Chenma sect in the first place. Newnham said so as we walked with Mount Beak on our back. The beliefs Chenma sect needed to pursue were corrupted by that child. In the first place, that child did not even properly learn the doctrine of the Chenma sect, and she did not even understand what it meant to spread the will of the Chenma sect to the world. That's why all the followers have been women. From what I know, the most important thing for the Chenma sect is strength. However, the Chenma sect founded by Beak So-HWI pursued to become stronger than men to protect themselves. It's not bad per se, or rather, to be honest, it's safe to say that such a belief which solidifies one's position as a woman was very good. Unfortunately, however, that was not the beliefs of those who were from Chenma sect, so the Chenma sect was disbanded. All the things a warrior named Seol Jungyun grew up with and dreamed of had disappeared. The ending was just like what I had expected in the first place. I am rather relieved that I let it end like this. Newnham smiled as if she was feeling refreshed. It was really contrasting to what had happened, but I had no choice but to nod my head, because she really seemed relieved after saying goodbye. By the way, is it okay? Don't worry, Newnham, it does not matter. One of our purposes coming to Xinjiang right away was to use the power of the Chenma sect to fight against the Murim alliance. However, since it had been disbanded, the method was now useless, so I could understand Newnham's concerns, but it really was okay. After all, even without the help of Chenma sect, the Murim alliance would gradually crumble because of fights happening inside. Even now, the current status of Battle of Jiangpa, which stems from Kunlun sect's rejection towards Murim alliance's demand for them to announce their stance on magic, and the magic orb was continuously being reported to me by the Shadow Group. Until now, the resistance of Kunlun sect was strong, and it seemed the battle had reached a stalemate. However, not long ago, news came that the palace of Kunlun sect had been demolished by the Murim Alliance's Namgung Min. In other words, the war has begun in earnest. We don't have to wait until they fight. We could just infiltrate Kunlun Mountain when experts from both sides were fighting. The war itself had become more chaotic than I thought. According to the information coming in one after another, the number of secret arts that were presumed to be the magic of the demons were increasing. It was clear that demons' activity has sharply intensified. The cause is probably the war. It was speculated that the demons, who had been quiet for a while, started to become active because of the intense emotions the war brings out, but the exact cause is still unknown. Can we eradicate all demons in Murim? It's possible, however, we currently don't have the way aside from annihilating all the clan that possessed the demon's sacred object, and it would take too long to do that. It was difficult work for me, the guild master of another league, Seol Yungyeon, the lord of New Murim Alliance, and an SS rank Hunter Taylor 9 who recently enjoyed an amiable relationship with the Hunter Association, as all of us were living a busy life on Earth. Is that so? Nunim said with a regretful tone. Because I felt sorry towards her, I tried to reassure her, but maybe it doesn't have to be me or Nunim or Taylor who fight the demon but somebody else. When the Vivienda Empire, which was a splendid magical civilization, was helplessly ravaged by demons, a girl named Araceli Reinkel appeared as a ray of hope. Maybe even in Murim, someone like that would also come out. Seol Yungyeon, a former lord of Chinmas sect and the only supreme being in Murim in the past, was Beek So Hy's love, hope, and at the same time her goal in life. Before she met Seol Yungyeon, she always filled her stomach with herbs found on the floor of the marketplace. She had no place to sleep and had to stay up all night when rain hit. She gathered shreds of paper just to warm herself in the cold winters and had to live in fear of getting caught by thugs. She thought all the struggles were natural in order to live. Happiness was far away from her. The only joy she felt was when she found some food leftovers, which was very rare. Follow me. With those words from Seol Yungyeon, her life completely changed. She no longer had to spend nights alone wailing in loneliness. She was able to wear brand new, warm, and cozy clothes, sleep comfortably in a room rather than a wet alley, eat food every day, and even become strong enough to defend herself. After not knowing the meaning of happiness, she finally became happy. When she first learned about it, So Hwi cried all day long. She was so upset because she had spent her whole life living as someone unhappy, though that happiness didn't last long. Beek So Hwi was afraid of men. Regardless of their age, men had always been stronger than her, and in order to defend herself from them, they had to be poisoned. She had to keep her nerves sharp all the time to the point she couldn't even sleep well. Maybe that's why when she saw a man, the trauma she had since childhood acted up. In the end, Beek So Hwi lost herself and was kicked out by Seol Yungyeon, whom she loved the most in the whole world. She still couldn't fix herself even after all the passing time. And now she was kicked out once again. Seol Yungyeon, who returned alive like a miracle, had fallen in love with a certain man, and Beek So Hwi thought it was wrong. And when she looked at Seol Yungyeon's unwavering gaze, she realized her idol had become wiser than before and understood her own heart better than anyone else. At that, understanding dawned into Beek So Hwi. She had found something she didn't have before. Was it really okay for her to tell someone like Seol Yungyeon, who had reached the supreme realm of Hunkyang, that she was wrong? Was it right to force someone else to do something just because it was painful for herself? Seol Yungyeon was always right. Her words were always the truth, the law, and soon-to-be law. However, Beek So Hwi had refused to believe her words just because she had reached the realm of Hwakyang and was trying to wield her master at will. Beek So Hwi bit her lips till it bled. She was embarrassed and felt pathetic for fighting against her master's love. Should I just die in Murim? Such mistakes could only be repaid in one way, by sacrificing one's life. However, Beek So Hwi shook her head. After all, her current life was something that had been given to her by Seol Yungyeon. So wouldn't it be more valuable to dedicate the rest of her life in atonement? With that thought in mind, Beek So Hwi continued to walk. With rain pouring from the sky, Beek So Hwi walked through the thick forest to avoid the rain. She gathered her inner strength countless times and wrapped it around his skin to warm her body, but suddenly, a commotion was heard from somewhere. She turned her attention towards it because of her curiosity and soon discovered something. Go away. It was a common sight in Murim. Dozens of bandits attacked a certain party. Upon closer inspection, the one being attacked was a family of 4. The wife and the 2 young daughters were embracing each other, terrified, and the head of the family, who seemed to be an ordinary person, held a thick branch and scowled towards the assailant. It's pointless, Beak Sohwi murmured. All the bandits were well built, and although not sharp, they had rough swords. On the other hand, the man had a dwarf physique, and his level of armament was also shabby. If they fight, he would lose 100 times out of 100. Seemingly aware of Beak Sohwi's thoughts, the man desperately opened his mouth and spoke. Honey, run away, I'll take care of everything here. Nevertheless, he still tried to protect his family. Beak Sohwi laughed at them as a new wave of emotions crept into her heart. The wound she suffered had been always lodged deep inside her chest and couldn't be seen nor healed. However, it felt different now because she had realized something. The wound was still there, but it had become visible to her. Boss, there's a crazy bitch coming here. What, that's a Murim uniform. Calm down, we are going to be okay. We have also received the power of the divine object that the Chong Pionim of Nakrim sect have. This power can be used even against a warrior of Murim. When Beak Sohwi inched closer to the bandits, they didn't show any sign of fear against her. Instead, they were clearly challenging her. Go away, you bitch, no matter how strong you are. If you're a human, you will feel despair, right? The mysterious magic they received from the divine object was a magic to draw a certain negative emotion from their opponent. Anger, confusion, despair, fear, pain. That was the identity of the power that the demon was dealing with. However, when the vicious purple energy shot by the bandit hits Beak Sohwi, it doesn't do any damage to her. Only. This is she looked at the magic with twinkling eyes for a moment before continuing her words with a grin. A magic trick used by the stupid people of Murim. I am sorry, but that doesn't work for me. Because I've always lived in despair. And then she unsheathed her sword. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like the video. Have a suggestion? Let me know in the comments.